footage if I need to. Feel free to talk. Whoa, good job, Troy.
Anybody catch the weather today?
No, I hadn't heard anything, but I've been wrong before.
What does this mean?
It means we gotta go now.
What? Why?
Oh no, it's a sandstorm. Get him! Come on. What, none for me?
Shaken, not stirred.
Easy, fellas. We're gonna be in here for a minute.
Maybe we should watch a movie.
Yeah, but let's not.
Why not?
The internet's out.
Dang. How long do sandstorms last?
Sometimes the groove can go all night.
What?
Sandstorms can take a while.
So what are we going to do to pass the time?
I'll tell you a story.
Maybe.
Oh, you're comfortable.
The 90s were a whole different world. The Cold War was behind us. A new war had replaced it, the Gulf War. We put a telescope in orbit, the Hubble, and started new things like the internet. Even longtime political prisoners were freed. As we were celebrating our new perspectives, we found some of the old things carried on. Rodney King, LA riots, the first World Trade Center bombing, and Johnny Carson leaving the Tonight Show. The Gulf War, despite being mostly about oil, went rather quickly, and without the threats of nuclear war, we turned our attention to something that may surprise those of us living in the post-9/11 Iraq and Afghanistan era. We didn't have much to worry about. So much so our TV programming even started to change. We made up stuff to be afraid of. Case in point, those of you too young to know, before the internet, we got our conspiracy, alien, ghost, and just plain bizarre stuff from a little weekly rag called the World Weekly News. Ecuadorian bat boy found alive in cave. Werewolf sues airline over flight delay. And that now infamous headline, Bigfoot versus aliens. I know it all seems strange now, but back then people just ate it up. So, X-Files. I grew up with this show, totally didn't understand it back then though. In the pilot episode, it almost starts like a horror movie. Girl running in the woods, trips, falls, a man is chasing her, he catches up to her, and they both vanish into white light. Lights fade, the same woman is face down dead. It's a crime scene now. This is a Bafo device used to show this. This is a show about the supernatural, but it's always as seen from an investigative, law enforcement angle. Kinda neat. Cops who investigate aliens. Dana Scully, Gillian Anderson, makes her appearance. An FBI agent who's just got partnered with everybody's favorite mumbly guy, Fox Mulder, David Mumbly Duchovny, is introduced here as a very talented criminal analyst. There is tons of friction here. Mulder is super suspicious of outsiders. They mention Mulder's nickname from his academy days. Spooky. It's because he's so driven to solve unusual cases. The reason for his interest isn't discussed yet, but don't worry, it will.
Logically, I would have
This
to say
episode
no.
sets up the entire
Given the
character
distance
dynamics that
between
will
me
endure
and
most of the
travel in the
series.
far reaches of
Mulder
space,
sees a
the learning
possibly
to exceed the
paranormal
space
event,
capabilities.
abduction, unexplained death, etc., puts forward an exotic theory. Scully says no way, she's too much a thinking person and needs proof, or it won't fly. If this is your first time seeing anything about the X-Files, this might seem pretty boring, even repetitive stuff. I assure you it is seldom tired or boring. The duo make a great pair, and conversation more represents not opposing sides, but how the viewer is called upon to consider the unusual, the strange, as a possible solution, but question everything and understand that sometimes the mundane is just as plausible. This balance really is the whole show. Mulder and Scully are sent on the first case, a series of possibly related deaths across the South. The plane turbulence scene is a nice touch. The plane gets shaken and the two, who sit in non-adjoining seats, react opposite of each other. Scully is fearful. Mulder never stops laying down with his headphones in until the turbulence ends. His attitude here is to show he's at a place in life where he's not afraid of an outcome of death, possibly even welcomes it. It's a small touch that gets built on later. Like we said, the show is driven by a ton of paranormal ideas of the day. They experience EMF distortion on the road to the town. This was a thing back then, a belief that electronic gizmos were affected by the presence of things like UFOs. Holy crud, one of my favorite reoccurring themes is introduced here. Townspeople who are either too dumb to know anything, or angrily oppose the action of the FBI, or disbelieve anything Mulder suggests, or my favorite, act strange and you guessed it, are actively covering up whatever mystery thing is taking place for whatever reason. I do personally think the frequency of this does wear a little after a while. Maybe just a tad overused and possibly a little carryover from horror movies, the way they treat locals and mystery or monster plots. Awesome. We see Mulder and Scully doing that mix again. Real police and forensic work coupled with possibly supernatural twist. The remains in the coffin do not appear to be the dead boy. We get to see here that Scully is adept at forensic investigation as she conducts an autopsy on the unknown body. She thinks it's an orangutan.
And Zach, what are you doing? Just checking the weather.
Storm still raging.
Don't look at it too long, man.
Right.
Found in the remains is another item that was discussed a lot back then in UFO abduction stories: implants. It was a big deal at that time for people to say they found devices implanted in their bodies, stuff left by aliens to locate them or possibly gather info on the victims. The pair learns that there are more kids in the town who might be afflicted with the same kind of madness and investigate it. The other kids are in a bad way, the boy in a coma and the girl suffering from what looks like PTSD. Mulder finds she has the same marks on her lower back as the other dead kids. Another great scene where they get to discuss how Mulder thinks Scully is a plant by the bad people in the FBI, and we get a typical scene.
I'm here to solve this case, Mulder. I want the truth.
The truth? I think those kids have been abducted.
By who?
By what?
Come on, it's a possibility that the unexpected, even paranormal, happened here.
Nah, there's not enough supporting evidence.
And that's the whole show. Evidence. That must mean a crime scene to visit, police investigation stuff mixed with paranormal stuff like spinning compass needle to show strange stuff is afoot.
Mulder, is that you?
And suspense moment leads to townspeople actively opposing the FBI investigation.
You're trespassing on private property here.
On the road back to town, they are seemingly abducted by aliens for like 10 minutes. This introduces more paranormal stuff appearing in books on UFOs, missing time. People who are snatched often report that they can't remember what happened and just have time they can't recall. I have to mention the literary and pop culture looter that Chris Carter, the director and writer of the series, was. The man read and absorbed all the paranormal stuff he could. Anything that his audience might be frightened of or maybe just interested in was mashed into the show. Here we see a moment meant to put the audience ill at ease. Scully has found the same marks on her back as all the kids here so far. By the way, the bumps on her lower back turned out to be just mosquito bites. The subtle ways Mulder and Scully grew closer even after the statement that Mulder trusts no one. Given this episode is just the pilot, he still had to show that Scully sees Mulder as noble but obsessive, and Mulder has to learn to trust someone. Here it is, the moment that will literally be the nexus of almost all major episodes ahead, Mulder's sister's abduction. There's a lot here, since so much comes up later. Let's just list the facts. Mulder's sister was abducted when they were children. He witnessed it. His family never got over any of it. The parents even divorced over it. It's why he's so compulsive about the paranormal stuff and seemed to welcome the abduction he says they went through earlier. Also explained here is something I missed by a lot my first time through the series back in the day. Mulder has a talent for what we call criminal profiling today. He's able to get into the thought processes of criminals, and his work has been used to find killers in cases before. Kind of interesting idea Carter had. This can and is often used to explain how Mulder seems to know much about people or situations, but Carter shows more restraint that he could have and doesn't overdo it. Mulder explains here that he found the X-Files, the FBI's piles of unsolved and usually barely investigated cases with paranormal elements, and was allowed to look into them because he was so good at profiling. Mulder name drops here and mentions he's after SEAL sealed documents with further info in them and might be able to get to them with his special contacts within the government. Mulder gets a call. One of the only surviving kids is now also dead. The body they found is missing, stolen out of the morgue. Another reoccurring theme, missing or destroyed evidence. I understand that Carter wants to keep the show going by not allowing them to retain hard evidence, so there can be plausible deniability. Another possible victim appears, and they get the usual local treatment. You better leave our town of people alone. With all the collected evidence gone, they check the cemetery, and guess what? It's all gone. Both of the bodies are gone, exhumed somehow without anyone seeing it. Boy in a coma is the one doing all the crazy stuff in town. Scully says he's crazy to suspect that a catatonic kid, but she stays on the case with Mulder. This idea that she stays even when she feels it's crazy, it's how she got Mulder to start trusting her early on. They found the catatonic kid has dirt under his toenails, like he's been up and around, but no one at the hospital saw it. They return to the woods and find out the creepy sheriff is there to stop them from getting to the crime scene. At gunpoint, the sheriff has the pair stay behind as he investigates. He finds his son carrying a girl, the only other surviving one. There's a strong wind circling them, like from the opening. Mulder and the sheriff witness what appears to be an abduction, bright light and all. Another theme we'll see for a while, especially in this season, is that Scully misses the paranormal moments through some mundane and circumstantial events. She had been struck earlier by the sheriff and was too late to the clearing to see the bright light. And against all odds, this one has a semi-happy ending. The light spits the kids back out, and the boy is conscious again, and the girl is safe. Even the marks are gone. The kid gets interrogated about what happened. He says he got sporadic orders from the light he saw and that he remembers little else in the last 4 years. The case is apparently closed. It continues with Scully getting grilled by some old dudes, possibly the men who want Mulder stopped, but probably not. Scully just tells him she can't produce any evidence of what happened except the implant she found. Holy shoot, when she walks out, walking in is the Cancer Man. Scully thinks it's strange that he entered the room just like that, but she then dismisses it. Scully gets a call from Mulder. The case they built in that small town against the boy who is being controlled is all gone. Someone stole the files. Dang you shadowy government agencies with far-reaching powers. The episode ends with the Cancer Man placing the implant Scully turned into a place just like they stored the Ark of the Covenant at the end of the Raiders of the Lost Ark, even going so far as to show this room is within the Pentagon.
Stop eating my sesame cake!
No.
It's good cake. And the story there too. Well, good. Because we're about to see the show's first use of its trademark theme music.
Nice.
This episode begins with a standoff with military police trying to get a soldier to surrender after he's supposed to have escaped from a military base in a military vehicle. The soldiers find him with burns all over his body. Oh boy, here we go, more old UFO lore here. It was commonly said in UFO books and whatnot that people who are exposed to alien technology, especially engine-related items, are supposed to have severe burns or radiation poisoning. Why not? It's that one dude who's watching Mulder, and maybe his source, or maybe not, maybe he's just eyeing an attractive young man, I don't know. The FBI totally said no way to investigate, but Mulder smells cover-up. He visits the bathroom and blammo, there's that old guy again. He tells him to back off, let it go. Shocking that a man in black would show up, not mention his own name, and then tell an investigator to stop trying to find the truth. Later, Scully feels like they could be getting into a mess here, and of course, tapped phones. Jet noise is used to provide atmosphere, maybe even imply the persistence of government work, I can't tell. They make it to the home of the lady whose husband was missing. Her husband was having mental issues and physical problems while flying experimental aircraft. She directs him to another lady whose husband also had an episode and left the military. Scully suggests the pilots are just suffering ill effects from flying experimental aircraft. They try to meet with people from the nearby airbase and fall right into a fixture of UFO lore in investigations in the 80s and 90s. Government stonewalling. They get antsy and visit some guy and try to ask him stuff when he's going home, and they get yelled at for their trouble. And I'll be danged, a classic UFO journalist shows up from the local newspaper, and man does he look like it.
Not every day we get FBI.
Jet noise again. Darn you, government presence or technological advancement, whatever you represent. He presses them, but they don't say much. The newspaper guy directs him to a local diner. This diner, like most 90s diners, had UFO photographs and a lady who's claimed to have taken some of them. She directs him to a place where people are supposed to have seen lights in the sky. Wouldn't you know it, you get out, scan the sky, and see lights in the sky. Look at that dancy stuff. She dismisses them pretty handily. In classic UFO story tradition, an unmarked helicopter appears and chases them off, but not before they find Seth Green trying to play Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. I'm just gonna let that sink in. So he says there's a place where they see UFOs all the time. Scully recognizes two toasty kids when she sees them, but Mulder drops it that this isn't about UFOs. He says they're dealing with jet and UFO hybrid tech-type vehicles. I guess. He even name-dropped about recovered tech from the Roswell crash. They then get a call saying the lady whose husband was missing, that her husband, Budahas, was just randomly reappeared at their home. The wife was in hysterics. She says her husband's mind has been changed, that he's been altered somehow. Mulder interrogates him, finds him normal, except that he couldn't answer anything related to advanced aircraft stuff, like how many G's a person can sustain. Somehow, this means he's been mind-wiped. Scully doesn't buy it. Right about then, some men in black show up. Say little, rough them up, and do what any good men in black would do, steal evidence. Look real close and you'll see one of the men in black is black. There's a joke somewhere in there. And he hit all the cliches of men in black. Stop investigating or else. Leave town and we'll wipe your mind, etc. Hey, Mulder came clean about the old guy in the bathroom. Hey, Scully says she thinks they should bail, for Mulder's sake at least. And he bailed. Seth Green shows him where the best watching spot is, and Mulder sets out alone. I guess there's some kind of noble thing here, not risking her life. I think it's so he can see paranormal stuff, and Chris Carter doesn't have to explain how Scully would dismiss it later. Called it. Base security quickly nabs Mulder after the UFO sighting. He's drugged in the back of a van, kind of like Seth Green's character must often get, and is carted through a hangar-ish place, where hilariously he sees a UFO-type silhouette behind some plastic sheets. The sheer number of people required to run these places and nobody ever squeals, huh? Meanwhile, Scully can't seem to reach anyone. Phones are all dead, the newspaper man meets her outside the hotel, and she just so happens to overhear military chatter over a walkie-talkie in the guy's car. So she does what anyone would do, jump right into a stranger's car and lock the doors. But he's a plant, a sham, he's a government agent. She interrogates him until Seth Green and his lady show up. I like that they roll up and see her holding a gun on a guy and yelling at him and are amused by it, not frightened. Mulder is getting introduced to a pseudo-abduction scenario, but instead of being probed, they're wiping his mind. Clean as a whistle. She kidnaps that sham guy and they go where Mulder is supposed to be. They let him go, not even flinching when she flashes a gun. They haul Rump out of there and he's clearly ridden the mind eraser. Little Six Flag joke. In typical fashion, the episode wraps with Budahas never recalling where he was all this time. Mulder's mind's wiped. Scully says they found nothing that they could prove in her report to the shadowy higher-ups. The old guy meets Mulder again out on a running track and tells him he's in danger. Kind of what he said before, but more importantly offers future UFO info stuff. They also reiterate Mulder has no memory of seeing the UFO from before. Decent plot device, but the old guy says he's after the truth too. Huh.
I guess I'm gonna get out of here. It looks like it's fine now, so yeah.
You know, it's still pretty bad out there, right?
I didn't make it. I'm exhausted. Well, alright, take a seat, because we're about to see true horror.
Stretchy guys.
This is an episode most people who've seen the show remember the most, the serial killer contortionist. Yes, that's what this one's about. We have also entered a section of the series we've come to call Chris Carter's Monster of the Week. It works like this. To keep the show creepy and capitalize on recent events and include other non-UFO based paranormal junk, Chris Carter wrote some episodes that technically don't connect to the underlying plot, but still provide some great moments. Here we see them investigate something a little different. Ageless serial killers. Episode opens. Some business guy walking down the street, all the while being watched by a pair of horror eyes looking out from a storm drain. There's a theme here, but I'll talk about that shortly. That same guy enters his office in a tall building and gets settled in for an all-nighter. We see a vent cover screws start turning from what seems to be from inside the vent itself. A hand reaches out and we see the dude walking into a darkened office and get attacked off screen. We now see the office trashed and what looks like blood dripping onto a rug in close-up. It's not, it's some kind of drink, but that doesn't make any sense. If it was wine, in order to be mistaken for blood, why was it in a mug? Anyway, the attacker escapes back in the same same vent, tightening a screw to seal it. The theme of this episode is obviously about unseen dangers, just tweaked to be about serial killers that can squeeze into small spaces to get at you. It's not a bad idea and fits with the idea of regular police work with some paranormal twists. The opening goes, and we see Scully having lunch with some guy. Not just any guy, you've seen him before. Donald Logue, playing Tom Colton. He's been in Blade, Sons of Anarchy, and now the show Gotham. He's a smarmy dude who makes Scully feel bad about being paired with Mulder, that it's harming her career. Colton asks her to get Mulder to help build a profile of a serial killer that the local police are clueless about. Colton even hints at the case, if it goes well, could mean she could follow him as he got promoted. Poppycock! Mulder is a high-level profiler, and we get a little nod to that here again. Mulder agrees to help, visits the crime scene, and says a great line.
Do you think I'm spooky?
We're gonna get some mileage out of that.
What the?
Mulder makes some uncomfortable conversation about aliens to mess with Colton and notices a tiny fragment below the same vent from before. It's tiny, but he still dusts her prints and finds a stretched, distorted print on it. He then links this crime scene to a series of murders with the same M.O., but spread over the last 100 years or so. Scully says she doesn't see the same man being the killer over all the cases, and Mulder's help is no longer being required by Colton and his team. He suggests they keep investigating and just try not to cross Colton's path. She gives Colton the profile Mulder made, gives the guys details, and suggests the best chance to catch him would be to stake out past crime scenes, as guys like this do that. She's asked to work with Colton on his part. The pair meets in a parking garage of a previous crime scene. Mulder concludes this wasn't a place he'd be likely to come back to, but he totally does anyway. Odd and contradictory all the way around. They catch the dude when he stumbles out of an air duct. Who couldn't trust that face? Now we see him getting polygraphed. He gets asked some silly stuff. The powers that be say he's not involved, that he's a city worker and was working on a duct removing a dead cat caught in it. No way. No city worker does more than the bare minimum to collect a paycheck. He's guilty. They let him go even though Mulder is sure they've got their man. Colton tries to make Scully leave with him after they disagree. She stays with Mulder, citing her curiosity about how Mulder being so sure. He compares the stretch print from before to the one just collected and they match. Stretchy guys are stretchy. Scully actually believes this one. Cue the killer, Eugene Toombs, breaking into a guy's house and squeezing into a chimney with a great early 90s morph effect. Yeah, drink it in. The victim? Some puffy guy like before. He attacks him, yanks his liver out like it was a spent spark plug or an offending weed, and roughhouses the guy to death off screen. The next day, Colton is desperate enough to try to stop Mulder from investigating the murders further. Mulder locates a census info from 1903 and finds Toombs is totally 100 years old and was involved in the murders from back then. No other records come through. The guy lives off the grid. The only lead is to talk to a guy who investigated the crimes way back in the 30s. He's a grizzled old guy and was terribly scarred by what he saw back then. He gives them the evidence he collected over the decades. He notes the killer always took small souvenirs from each murder. He also shows them a photo from the 60s, and Toombs is spot on the same guy. The evidence shows Toombs' old apartment address from decades ago. They check it out. At first, they find a rundown sty, but in the basement, they find a dingy basement. In the dingy basement, they find a filthy wall of mucus and wads of paper. And Mulder proposes a theory about how Toombs does what he
I
does.
don't think it's where he lives. I think it's where he hibernates.
Hibernate?
Just listen. What if some genetic mutation could allow a man to awaken every 30 years?
Mulder.
And what if the 5 livers could provide him sustenance for that period? What if Toombs is some kind of 20th century genetic mutant?
No one's gonna get this, but
I'm gonna prove to you that I'm the man with the largest arms in the world. I'm the genetic freak.
they plan to put the building on surveillance, but a sneaky Toombs grabs Scully's necklace on the way out as they leave. Colton is mad about Mulder's investigation and actually has the stakeout canceled. Good job, dummy. Scully storms out, heads home, but Mulder is out in a seedy alley and can't be reached. He finds the stakeout is gone and checks the decrepit nest house again, finds Scully's necklace and sees she's next. I get that's how he's supposed to figure out, but wow, must he be watching her close to have 100% ID her jewelry in candlelight while frightened. Convenient bile. Landlines. Look at this fight scene. So slow and awkward. In a nice little scene, we get to see the older policeman get to see that they did catch him, and they keep his reaction low-key. Ready for another ugly scene made to stick with the audience? Toombs is licking paper to build a new nest. Scully reports he's exactly as thought, a super flexible, deep hibernating capable monster man. Nice. Real documented evidence of a monster? How could this go wrong and keep up the theme that no evidence of the paranormal ever gets to stay in the sun? They left the stretchy guy with a mail slot-sized opening and implied he ultimately escapes. But that face.
That's it. We're gonna get some mileage out of that.
How would you?
Oh, you'll see.
All right, fellas, let's get out of here. The storm is over, and so is the story.
Maybe we can still get a little bit of frisbee in.
Oops, forgot my phone. Action.
No. You better get out here.
I don't think we have much time.
It's a doggone tsunami.